the wacky world of MultimediaJay.
Well, I finally have a slightly less wintry wallpaper now that we're finally getting some better weather for a change for the first time since late January, I think. So now that things might actually warm up a bit, I think it's time to do some maintenance with Tuxedo. Because I found out the other day that the dust covers that I have on this thing, where the air gets sucked into the system to cool the processor, haven't been on straight. So there's actually been a little bit of a gap for dust to get in. So there's probably dust all over the place inside this thing. Not as much as there would be if there were no dust covers. But I also want to pop this thing open to do some experimenting to see exactly where this high idle wattage comes from. Now, from what I've done with computers over the last several years, I'd say the video card is probably the biggest culprit. But I'm curious with the kilowatt over there, what exactly each component or set of components contributes to Tuxedo not being able to go below 100 watts when it's idling. Because the biggest problem that I've had with desktop versus mobile lately is how desktops just can't ramp down enough to be competitive wattage-wise when they're not being used for heavy-duty stuff like gaming and editing videos and stuff like that. So, I think it's time we started tearing some of this mess apart and see if we can get at Tuxedo and see how dusty it is on the inside. Not a good sign. Well now, therein lies the problem. You can see the fan peeking out underneath where the dust filter wasn't in the right spot. This one, of course, wasn't even touched at all, so that's still kind of where it needs to be. But the one above it, that blows onto the CPU, by the way, isn't where it should be. So even though I did try wiping it off at one point, I didn't put it back on correctly, which is a stupid idea when it comes to trying to put these things on blind by reaching around the side of the case. Anyways, I wonder what a dusty mess we're going to have when we pop the cover on this thing. When these things were on correctly, they did a pretty good job of keeping dust out of the case. There wasn't much to blow out. But not so sure about that this time. This is also the reason why these hack jobs snapped on the side magnetic dust filters are no replacement for a case with a proper dust filter in the front, like the fractal design cases that I've been wanting to get for my next system. Or heck, maybe I'll even throw this system into one of those cases if it means not having to have this happen every several months. And there's what got through the filter. This isn't gonna be good. Let's use up... I actually borrowed a straw from a newer duster can to use up these older ones. Yeah, I think this thing's just about out. Yeah, I'm going to be sending my allergies through the roof trying to do this. Not too bad, but the filters that weren't covering things up correctly did allow a little more dust to get through than usual. I remember last time I was a little surprised. I opened this up next to no dust. Let's get this all blown out and hope I'm not sneezing too much for the rest of the day. Okay, everything's about as blown out as it's going to get, and the kilowatt is ready to go to test out the wattage and things like that, but already we can see why I want to get a case with native support for 140mm fans, because look at the funnels going everywhere, mostly for the exhaust and stuff like that. So we have this, yeah, see, this is flush, so I had to actually take the hinge off the case. So this is actually flush to the side of the case because it won't fit any other way. So I actually have to use the thumb screws in order for the case to stay shut. Basically, the case was designed for 120mm fans, and I tried to outfit it with 140mm fans by any means necessary. Now, let's fire this up, put it in power save mode, turn everything down, and see what we can get here. Except it'd be nice if there was a keyboard and mouse, because I kind of was using the front ports for those because of some technical issues earlier. Anyways, so yeah, we're gonna fire this thing up, put it in power save mode, get the 100-watt reading right off the bat with not much running, and then I think the video card's gonna make the biggest difference because this GTX has a lot of extra power adapters and stuff like that. But I'm betting once we remove this video card and go back to integrated video, the wattage drops significantly. Anyways. Much better. Keyboard and mouse are in the front panel. I was just using that because of some technical issues earlier. So this thing already has some power, so let's get this thing fired back up. I am going to leave the now useless side fans running because, well, they're part of the power consumption, so I want to leave them running on the door, even though it's not really going to do anything, just to keep the numbers consistent here. So last weekend, I actually did some experimenting off-camera where I fiddled around with integrated graphics versus discrete graphics card, because somebody actually did a YouTube video about how certain motherboards can actually turn off the discrete graphics card and just use integrated graphics to do all the video processing if there isn't heavy-duty stuff going on and save energy this way. I'm probably going to end up calling out this guy for making a bogus YouTube video at some point, because I don't believe a word of it. Yeah, that's right. Forgot I actually have the, I have my Windows 7 modded that actually uses NT4's startup sound. Alright, let's start everything up here. Let's get rid of the ugly desktop icons. Alright, we're back. And let's put this in 35 degrees out. Nice. It'll show things correctly here. Let's see. Drop this down to power save mode and we'll see what we get on the kilowatt. We're routing through it, of course. So once all the startup processes start, so it's sitting at 120 watts. I think what keeps it at 120 watts, it's gone down to 100 watts even, but I think that's after the hard drive shut off in power save mode. So once it's done loading, well, it is done loading everything. This thing has an SSD, so I imagine that okay, so at 120 watts, I think when these drives, these two data drives turn off, that's what drops it down to 100 watts. So once it's not doing stuff or not updating stuff, that's probably some wattage right there. But I think the biggest contributor is probably this video card. So anyways, yeah, there's a guy who did a YouTube video about how supposedly systems can switch to integrated graphics and back. I think I'm going to call this guy out for making a bogus YouTube video at some point, because my system certainly didn't do that. Basically, if it's plugged in, it's powered, and I think that's what's going on with this video card. Alright, so we're down to 110 watts, which is still way above what the netbook or the laptop would do, and certainly leagues and bounds away from what the tablet would do, being a 5-watt device, which I did kilowatt it later on and find out that yes, it is actually a 5-watt device. So about 110 watts, I imagine when the drives turn off, they will probably go down to 100 even. So let's begin with the biggest monster of the bunch, removing the video card. Now the interesting thing here is, this motherboard, this old Gigabyte motherboard, is smart enough that if I leave the integrated graphics turned on and put in a discrete card, it just shuts the chip off. Doesn't show up in the device manager, and my wattage was completely unaffected by whether or not I had the integrated graphics turned on or off in the BIOS, because the BIOS setting didn't make any difference in the wattage. It basically would shut off, it'll shut off the integrated chip unless you're using it for an additional monitor. Creaky chair as usual. Unless you're using it for a discrete monitor, having that will, unless you're using it for a discrete monitor in a multi-display setup, the integrated chip actually completely shuts off. Alright, let's get this video card out and see how much the numbers drop. Video card is out, and what a fine specimen it is. An EVGA GeForce GTX 760, flies all over most games that I throw at it. I don't have anything too new though, anything really newer than Guild Wars 2, so does have a lot of extra power connectors though, and it does accumulate its own unique set of dust that has to be blown out. So I just blew the stuff out of all these massive heat sinks, put that up there for now. Actually, let's put it down on the side that doesn't conduct. Put this down on the side that doesn't conduct, and of course it makes a nice little EVGA billboard up there too. Alright, if the computer doesn't throw a fit, we have switched over to integrated graphics, which it should fail over to when I fire everything back up. Let's see how much the computer or Windows happens to throw a fit here. Go. Fans are all still spinning, so we should still see the same kind of power consumption. Oops! Oh, you've got to be kidding me!
Epic fail.
Old Radeon card that predates the GTX has been added back in because it's much lighter. So, alright, we're only gonna do this just enough to get into the BIOS and change the init display first setting over to on. Oh, that's nice. So it wasn't the graphics card. Let me guess, RAM socket 3 is loose again. Good old RAM socket 3. This is one of the reasons why this will be my last gigabyte motherboard ever. Because, yeah, there's something with RAM socket 3 on this thing. Whenever I blow air out or do anything serious like what I'm doing, usually it goes loose or something and causes a postcode. The extreme majority of the postcodes that I've had in this system have all been because of, you guessed it, RAM socket 3. You know what? I'm gonna gut half the RAM. As predicted, yanking out half the RAM solved the problem, and it boots up again now. This motherboard sucks. It'll be the last gigabyte motherboard that I ever get. This thing has never passed a MemTest 86 either. Alright, as the dust starts messing with me. There we go! Finally! Now we're running off of integrated graphics. So let's see what we get for power and stuff like that. So apparently the init display first shuts the integrated graphics on and off too, so there probably was some VGA errors in there as well. But I leave the integrated graphics on, so if the video card ever fails, I can start the machine back up. But it looks like if I have to do anything else involving the motherboard of this machine again, it's probably not going to make much of a difference with how these RAM sockets keep messing up like this. So yay, 4 gigs of RAM. This thing's now an over-glorified office machine. Alright. Oh, it's flipping out. No supported hardware detected! That would be... have to stop getting covered up by everything. That's Precision X64, which is a video card utility. Now it's flipping out. Has to go back to Radeon drivers. Alright, well, so far the kilowatts looking interesting because we're now at 115, 116, 105. So now, 110. Things are still loading. There's drivers loading up for the integrated graphics. But this gives me an idea of what kind of wattage I can expect if I ever want to make a secondary system out of this thing with no video card. Just put the motherboard into something and then just use the built-in motherboard stuff. Yeah, it's still installing... Whoa! Screen blanked out. Crash!
Epic fail.
Don't crash it, Jason! Well, it is above freezing outside, so that's a welcome change from what we've been seeing lately. Okay, it looks like the thing's not gonna blue screen anymore. What are we looking at for wattage? Considering the video card is usually one of the biggest contributors to power consumption in a computer, what have we dropped down to by yanking out the video card, getting sent back to like built-in Radeon 5000-ish something graphics, whatever this motherboard came with. Actually, I think it might be 4000 something graphics, but basically terrible. Today's APUs from AMD probably offer more graphical punch than whatever came on this motherboard in 2010. And we're down into the 90s, which is still, we go up to around 100 if we start doing anything, but we've dropped like 10-20 watts grand total. Which really shows just how bad AMD has fallen behind on the TDP front with wattage consumed by the processor. So, alright, so we go from like 110 down to like the mid-90s or so. So, nothing too exciting. Oh, back to 100 for whatever reason. So, yeah, really not too much by yanking out the video card and going back to integrated graphics. Although now that I know the motherboard is so picky that I probably can't... Well, I wonder if I can get this thing working with 8 gigs of RAM and integrated graphics, just for a fair reading. It's running again, on all 8 gigs of RAM. My hands are going to be so sore from futzing around with that RAM so much, but at least it's running again. Okay, here's what we're getting for wattage. As I thought, the RAM really doesn't do too much to the wattage. 90s, 200s, basically, without the video card. So a modest gain in wattage, even idling wattage on power save mode when the video card's in, but not really as much of the contributions to this high wattage as one would think. So, I wonder, could that processor in there be the main source of this issue, or is it the Silencer Mark II way overkill 750 watt power supply? This thing can handle 750 watts max. But this thing running full blast with the video card that I have right now is only capping out around the 300 mark. I wonder if the 12-volt devices might contribute to the power more significantly, the power consumption more significantly than the video card does. Alright, let's put it back together and get it working again with the integrated graphics turned off and resume our little experiment, shall we? Well, there's my first answer regarding contribution to the wattage. I haven't even touched anything. I've just been running the computer long enough for the two mechanical hard drives to click off because they're not getting accessed, and now I'm down into the mid to upper 90s when idle. Now, of course, this still is nowhere near competitive. This is still nowhere near competitive with the portables. But let's go to my computer here and let's actually activate both of these drives. So, open and open. So let's make both drives spin back up, and suddenly, hey, what do you know? So we've gone from 90-something to... So in other words, the hard drives make more of a contribution to the wattage of the system than the video card does. The video card took us from like 110, 120 down to like 95. So these two drives combined are pretty much doing what the video card does. So the video card's somewhat decent at ramping down its power usage, but really, I think the big thing to do is to switch these drives off. No wonder it's being touted as such a great... Oh, there it goes, clicking off again. And there go the wattage, because I haven't actually accessed these drives. Because I didn't access one of the drives. Well, actually, what happened was I clicked open on H and I, which are the two drives, and then I only left the window open for the I drive. And so it's clicking off. Now the drives not being accessed are clicking back off again, and we're back down below 100 watts. Next question. How much are these 140mm fans contributing to the wattage? Look, Ma, no fans! And very solidly in the low 90s idle now. So, this is one of the reasons why a fan-controlling motherboard is a great idea, including shutting off the fans if they're not needed, or being able to program fans to shut off if they're not needed. Another good reason to have a decent fan controller, but it's better if the fan controller be automated based on the processor and graphics card temperatures, so you're only spinning these kinds of big fans when you actually need them. For my last trick, I have severed the power from the mechanical drives as well as the optical drives as well as the fans. So we're literally just going to have an SSD running everything. So let's fire everything up. Hopefully Windows doesn't go crazy. Set the kilowatt back to watts, and let's see how low it gets when it's idle. Well, as predicted, 89 watts. Now we're getting down into silver bullet territory. But as predicted, unplugging all the other stuff didn't really do too much to the wattage. The main contributors are definitely the video card and the drives and the fans. No doubt because they're usually on and stuff like that. And unfortunately, this motherboard doesn't have any motherboard-controlled fans. No, I think it's like PVM or something like that. This motherboard, unfortunately, doesn't have any. The only 4-pin channel that it has is the CPU fan. So the CPU fan can get controlled by the motherboard, but the chassis fans, unfortunately, do not. You kind of have to mess with them manually. And so I'm hoping that maybe the next system I build will have better fan control and can slow down and shut off fans that aren't necessarily needed to keep the processor at an appropriate temperature. But there we go. So now we're into the 90s. So I can get this from the 110s down to the 90s and save roughly 20 watts by unplugging all the drives, turning off all the fans, etc. So that's not very much wiggle room, which just goes to show why exactly I will want to focus on power efficiency and bang for buck computing with the next system that I build. Because I don't really need the best system out there. I don't need to be running... I don't even know what the biggest game is right now that kills everybody's systems if you try to run it in high mode. All the games that I have right now that I'm interested in playing, and I do have a backlog even on PC and in Steam, everything that I play right now can be handled by the system that I have right now. This thing flies all over Skyrim, it flies all over Test Drive Unlimited 2, it flies all over Burnout Paradise. It really does the trick. So it has the high-end performance that I need. And this is even without using the built-in overclocking, which could turbo boost the 3.2 gigahertz max cores in the 1090Ti up to 3.6 gigahertz. Problem is, these processors have a bad reputation for sucking a ton more power when they're getting overclocked, as well as giving off a lot more heat, so I don't use the Core performance boost right now. Plus, I mean, we're talking about Core i5 performance with how this chip runs these days. So, yeah, okay, well, hasn't that been an interesting delving into the insides of Tuxedo here in its sunset years? But that is why I need to focus on bang-for-buck computing. So yes, if I'm playing a game, I want it to ramp up and be able to tackle the game, but when I'm just playing around on YouTube or something like that, or just poking around in Windows, no, it's got to ramp way, way, way down in order to be competitive with portable devices that can, you know, even when I'm in the 90s right now for wattage, the portables are in like the 30s, 20s, and 10s not the same, but enough performance to do 2D stuff. So this is where desktops come up short. Hate to be the one to admit it, but the desktop does have a bit of a power problem right now, and it's not because they're not powerful enough, it's because they don't ramp down enough when you're not doing top-end stuff on them. So, as much as Windows has made the move towards being more power efficient recently, it needs to go further, and hardware needs to go further too, and especially AMD processors need to go further as well. Yes, they're less expensive as far as sticker price goes. However, I've heard of some of the power-saving features in Intel chips. So, if Intel chips retain the edge with bang for buck and power consumption, the difference in price between an AMD and an Intel rig could turn out to be just an upfront fixed cost instead of an ongoing cost the longer you run the machine. There, that's better. For the record, now that I've washed these nice washable filters, this is the way these Silverstone filters should go on, completely covering where the blades spin. I also kind of hack job an additional filter in the front by helping myself to a filter out of an Antec case. It's a little bit of a mess to get it to stick though, because this case wasn't originally meant for it, but eventually it gets stuck in there. Maybe I have to put it in the other way. Yeah, there is a way that I can stuff this up here and then have it get stuck in there to where it won't fall out. Unfortunately, when trying to get it out, I shattered my Excalibur. Boo-hoo-hoo-hoo-hoo. I'll get another one off of Amazon. Got it. I was wondering how the heck this managed to work. The grill that thing actually does jam a little bit underneath the front port holder thing. So that's how it's able to stick in there without falling out. I should just get a case that actually is made to have a filter in the front. As well as intakes in the front too! There, everything's working again. However, the Monolith dilemma continues. Because the question remains, what exactly would I need to build a desktop that could really ramp up to play games and then ramp down to do everything else, better than any other system that I've ever built to this point? That's the only way that desktops will remain competent in this world where mobile just seems to be taking over all over the place, and even rudimentary mobile processors nowadays have enough horsepower to do the basics for people that just want to do the basics. For the rest of us, though, the search for the computer that does it all and then some continues. Till next time, this is MultimediaJay signing off. Thanks for stopping by.